Today, Kin 9, is the day red solar moon. Because it's a red day, we begin a new time cell. A time cell is the 4-day sequence that is coded by a red day, a white day, a blue day, and a yellow day. The red initiates. But today, because we're in the 4th week of the planetary dog moon, this week is a week of power. It's the yellow week, but it's a red day. So today we have the power of knowledge. The harmonic for today also begins. The harmonic is a time cell which is coded by the movement of the solar seals through the galactic spin. Harmonic 3, crystal process. Formulate free will of cooperation. Kin 9, red solar moon. I pulse in order to purify. Realizing flow, I seal the process of universal water with the solar tone of intention. I am guided by the power of life force. On this 24th day of the planetary dog moon, we have a gamma day. It's a day of the mystery. The 24th step to Bolon Ik Spirit Tower of the Wind. This is in the superconscious plane. Heaven Walk, day 1. Retrace Bolon Ik steps from the spirit to the navigation towers. Here Bolon Ik meets with the 4 and 20 elders and receives telecosmic number power of cosmic form, which is 24. That's 6 times 4. 24. Velotropans, you know about that number 24. Velotropa 24, our star system of Kanichahau. Today we will cover time and morality, the experimental zone. In the morning we will be covering time and prophecy, the view from Velotropa. And then this afternoon we will go carefully through the tool, the Telektanon of Valum Votan. And as we do each day, in order to establish the synchronic order, we read from the Telektanon prophecy book for the section which is coded by the moon. This section today is Imperial Babylon. I read, Children of the book, even before the close of my first Baktun, 20 generations from the year BC 3113, the foundations of the Tower of Babel were laid. Captive now were the 144,000 within the earthly prison of Babylon's materialism. Yet by my devotion and power of meditation, from deep within the earth, aided by Bolon Ik's perseverance on far Uranus, Earth's harmonic twin, I kept the sacred counts of days. I watched over the movement of the sacred march of kin. 4 more Baktuns passed, and Babylon's power was swollen with the loot of empire. Despite the righteousness of Abraham and the law of Moses, the shadow of the Tower of Babel only increased in size and darkness. Came the 6th Baktun, and Imperial Babylon was complete. Its seal of false time and power, taxation and armed expanse had fulfilled Iblis's desire to degrade and ruin all humanity by making wrong fair seeming now to amass wealth and power, fair seeming to make a count of time by 12 months, and fair seeming to regard the 13th moon with superstition and contempt, fair seeming to gather taxes and to pay them, fair seeming to make war for the power of kings, fair seeming that birth and death must be paid for, fair seeming that all power come from the priests, Iblis's most cherished of men. O people of the book, lost to you was all memory of the law of the cube. Slavery became your lot. But I am Valum Votan, time's special witness. even before the coming of the second special messenger, Christ, the apostle of love, by my free will and my knowledge of the power of seven, I laid claim to the seven seals of prophecy, that on the day of truth, Iblis's curse would be finished, and the righteous would triumph. And now the day of truth is come. Telektonon, the talking stone, now speaks in a voice for all to hear. By the seventh Baktun, the seven seals of prophecy were stored in earth's special lodestone of truth, whose custodian am I. By the eighth Baktun, Iblis had caused the Tower of Babel to speak more tongues in a growing clash of empires. Into this confusion came the apostle of love, crucified for driving the moneylenders from the temple, misunderstood by the people of the book, finally to be absorbed by the priests of Babylon, now Roman by tongue, who used this Christ as their emblem to spawn Iblis's greatest evil, the total usurpation of earthly time. And finally, in the synchronic order, we read the dynamics of time according to the code number 9 and the tone 9. We read from the dynamics of time 9.9. The creation of the circumpolar rainbow bridge is a projective function of applied radiosonics, owing to the release of radion and the creation over time of the heptagon of mind and primal cubic parton, aligned to the collective mental coordination of the opening of the four Cybank plates over the 4-year conscious phase of the biosphere-noosphere transition, AD 1996 to 2000. This 9.9 is like a preview, which we will be going through. We'll be going through the heptagon of mind, primal cubic parton, when we get to the presentation on the 7777. So that's like a future reading for today. And finally, in order to introduce Votan's teaching for this morning, I read to you from the Telektonon Instruction Manual, the section Telektonon, Divine Revelation of Time. Telektonon, the prophecy of Pakal Votan, is a divine revelation, the last to be received and delivered before the closing of the great cycle of 26,000 years in the year 2012. This revelation began to be received July 26, 1993, Kin 144, Yellow Magnetic Seed, the first year of prophecy. Telektonon, Earth Spirit Speaking Tube, knowledge of the supreme law of time, is a revelation of the cube of the law. Time has the power to reduce mountains to dust. The fourth dimension of time is greater than and includes the 3 dimensions of space. The cube of the law is the cosmology of time. The cube of the law is self-existing and springs from its own intersection. This divine intersection consists of 3 simultaneous planes. The all-foundation plane of mind. Mind is the root of time, which originates, moves, and dissolves all things. The plane of spirit. Spirit is the root of telepathy. Telepathy is the instantaneous order of mind as number. The plane of will. Will resonates order and is the root of atomic structure, both molecular and cellular. From the divine intersection, the 3 planes of mind, spirit, and will create the internal order of the cube of the law. In its prophetic form, the cube of the law is also known as the heptagon of mind. Heptagonon refers to the formal power of 7, the 6 sides of the cube, and its 7th internal point, the divine intersection. Coded in the heptagonon of mind are the 7 seals of the 7 years of prophecy. And we are completing in the upcoming event on July 25th, the Circumpolar Rainbow Bridge, we are completing the 7th year of prophecy. And we should always keep that focus in mind of how precisely we are here at this time, closing out the 7th year of prophecy. So I have covered the synchronic order, the reading for the morning. If you have a Telexan on board, you would have arranged your pyramids and your turtles in the correct position. You would have contemplated the codon line for the day, that we've completed the codon, the first trigram of the codon. We've completed the heart moon crystal today. So you'd notice that it's kin 9 and the moon. And you've also noticed that we've also entered a new biphasic codon, and so on. So the synchronic order is something that you build into by your level of knowledge, whatever level of understanding you have. You simply do that practice each day at the level that you understand. And in this way, there's profound patience, again, that is required with this whole body of knowledge to understand, again, what is important is what you don't know, so that you can ask questions and learn, rather than from the other perspective that you know everything already and you can't hear anything. So please empty your cup again for today's teaching.
Thank you very much, and good morning, and welcome to day 3, which you'll notice on your little program says Gamma, the mystery. This is the Gamma, what you see there, the Dali, Celi, Gamma, Kali, Alpha, Limi, Celio on your little program, right? That those refer to what are called the 7 seals of prophecy, and also correspond to the 7 primal radial plasmas. We'll be hearing more about those radial plasmas as we move along, but these are the seals. And then also you'll see that there's other code words that go along with them. The throne, the avatar. Yesterday was the day of the avatar when Dr. Arcturus showed up to stand in for our host, okay? And today is the day of the mystery. Tomorrow is the day of the initiation. And then we have the time, space, and transcending, and the cube. Those are all code words that refer to what are called the 7 major arcanum of time. So today is the day of the mystery, and it is truly a mystery that I'm even here. That the topic for today has to do with the topic of time and morality, and is referred to as the experimental zone. And we have in the context the issue of time and prophecy, the view from Velatropa. There would be no prophecy if we were truly moral. Just as simple as that. That prophecy exists in the free will experimental zone because human beings are the test, the subject of the experiment and of the test, which is the test of free will. And when we say what is the test of free will, what the test of free will is to see if you can use your free will to align it with the truth, or whether you want to use your free will to explore your ego on its own. And so that's why we have the entire drama of what is called human history, in which, as we've pointed out, is very precisely noted by the scheme of the 13 Baktuns of the Mayan Great Cycle, or the Long Count. Those 13 Baktuns are just the last fifth of a 26,000 year cycle. The 26,000 year cycle is the cycle in which what we call the experiment is being focalized and localized, as we showed you yesterday, where we are. Just to read, in case somebody got lost in the night and doesn't remember where we are, I just want to point out to you that we are right there. We could make a drawing on the board to make that a little more explicit. This experience is experimental zone. This is the pulsar Vela right here, and we have a 6,000 light year, a zone 6,000 light years across, right in the middle of it, and this is in the Orion arm. Of the galaxy, relatively far out place on the galaxy. A lot of people avoid this zone. It's just very dangerous, you know. The real reason why the flying saucers haven't landed, of course, is they don't want to be blown up. Why would you visit a place, you know, where guns and rockets are always aimed at anything that comes near it? No reason to do that. That's because it's the experimental zone. The rockets and the guns are what are called abuse of free will, and the have nothing to do with aligning your will with the divine plan. Right in the center here, that's what we call Vela. See, this is Vela, and the turning, this whole cycle here, turning, Tropa. This is the zone where Vela turns. Vela is a pulsar. And it's boom, over to there, pulsing information to where we are. Velatropa 24 is in the exact center. You can go look at your National Geographic map of the galaxy, and you'll see that we're absolutely smack dab in the center of the zone where Vela turns, okay? And Velatropa 24 is right there. You can draw another ellipse in there, and that's a 3,000 light year zone. And inside that zone you have a major star here, Sirius. Very close to us you have Antares, Arcturus, Alpha Centauri, Altair, Aldebaran, and also such things as NGC. Let's see, try some numbers. Let's get them straight. NGC 63087 and other such stars as this. Okay, so there's also what's called for instance, the Cat's Eye constellation out here. There's also something in here called the North American constellation. And so on. But we're right there, and that's Velatropa 24 with its little planetary system, and of course we're V or 0.3. Okay, so this zone is the experimental zone. Okay, this is the experimental zone where take something. That experimental zone is where the human beings are the final, and planet Earth, or Velatropa 24.3, is the final repository of the all the different experiments that have been occurring in this galaxy and in this universe. Theologically, this is referred to as the zone where God created the human from one prototype, and from that prototype created two, and then from those original two, they were given the opportunity, according to the mythic story, of seeing if they were able to be submissive to divine law. Okay, and the test for them, of course, was the famous tree. Okay, the tree of wisdom, and when God created the primal two, He told them that they could live freely as they chose, but to avoid eating from the divine tree. Now, when you read the story in the Quran, it's clear that what we're talking about is that the original, that they were in the fourth dimensional, that they didn't notice that they had bodies. Okay. It's only when they ate from the tree that their bodies became visible to them. Okay, and the point of their eating from the tree was not that they weren't supposed to grow in wisdom, but to see whether or not they could remain in submission to divine will. They would have remained in submission to divine will had it not been for Iblis or Satan. In the story, of course, when God creates Adam and Eve, well, I'll read that. It's very interesting when you hear the original story. Which first occurs in the second chapter or surah of the Quran. He says, "Recall that your Lord said to the angels, I am placing a representative on earth. They said, will you place therein one who will spread evil and shed blood, while we sing your praises and glorify you, and uphold your absolute authority? He said, I know what you do not know. He taught Adam all the names, then presented them to the angels, saying, give me the names of these if you are right. The angel said, be you glorified. We have no knowledge except that which you have taught us. You are the omniscient, most wise. Verse 33. He said, O Adam, tell them their names. When he told them their names, he said, did I not tell you that I know the secrets of the heavens and the earth? I know what you declare and what you conceal. It's interesting that Adam was given all the names of the angels, and that the angels themselves did not know their names. When we said to the angels, fall prostrate before Adam, they fell prostrate except Satan. He refused, was too arrogant and a disbeliever. We said, O Adam, live with your wife in paradise and eat therefrom generously as you please, but do not approach this tree lest you sin. But the devil duped them and caused their eviction therefrom. We said, go down as enemies of one another. On earth shall be your habitation and provision for a while. They came elsewhere from earth. Where did they come from? Okay, and then this is the story that is picked up in the Arcturus probe, for instance, of the saga of the lost planets. In Velatropa 24, we have the 5 outer planets and the 5 inner planets. And the 5 inner planets, starting with the 5th planet out, was originally the planet called Maldek. Maldek was not discovered actually until 1801 by the German astronomer Bode, who knew that if he followed Kepler's theory of mathematical ratios between the planets, that there should be some planet between Mars and Jupiter. So training his telescope in that area, he didn't find a planet. He found the asteroid belt. And the asteroid belt maintains the orbit of maintains the orbit of what was originally the planet Maldek. Very few astronomers ever speak of that. They just think that those asteroids gathered there, as if there hadn't been a planet there. But they're very clearly and very distinctly in the area of the orbit of what was then the planet Maldek. And as we were talking yesterday, Maldek is represented by the serpent and by the wizard. Okay. In the Christian Genesis, the serpent is the one that's involved with the giving the message to Eve. Okay, in the Quranic stories, that's not Eve is not the culprit. Okay, and both of them are the culprits, and it's the devil that talks to them. Also, in the story, in another, there's 7 variants of that story in the Quran, and some of the variants of that story, the Iblis or Satan says after God says to him, "Get out of here, you're despicable." Iblis says, "Yeah, but grant me one wish." And then God's very compassionate and says, "Sure, what's your wish?" And he says, "My wish is that I'm able to deceive as many of these people on earth as is possible." And then God says, "Okay, give it a try." And then Satan says, "Good, I'm going to use every kind of deceit and ruse that I can imagine to do this." And God says, "Fine, you can take them all, except for there's one group of the elect that you'll never get." Okay. And so this is the background script on that story. According to the Arcturus probe, and you go from Maldek then to Mars. Okay. And Mars is the zone of the World Bridger and of the Skywalker. And again there, the civilization on Mars also gets destroyed. And so the planet does not blow up like the Zymox, like the planet Maldek, which was destroyed, and which is also associated with the lost chord, the Zymox, which is, everyone's always struggling to remember, what was the lost chord? Okay, this was the especially in the Romantic period of European art. They're trying to remember that, and so they go from Maldek to Mars, and then finally they come to Earth. Okay, and that this is finally where all of this experiment is finally focalized. I had, as I mentioned before, the situation of Arcturus and Velatropa was first presented to me in 1981 after I met Bolonek, and I was given the opportunity of writing something called the Art Planet Chronicles. And the Art Planet Chronicles is a very interesting and strange story. It includes a number of protagonists. The story is told by 2 people in alternating, what are called alternating tape logs or voices, a male voice and a female voice, Prospero Edmund Jones and Francesca della Francesca. And they are lovers and living in this parallel planet Earth in the not too distant future. And the story is called the Art Planet Chronicles, the Making of the Fifth Ring, the prologue from the Annals of the Arcturian Archives is where the prologue is. And it says, "Once upon a space-time vector, so it has been told, far beyond the fair Arcturian skies in the distant galactic cloud called by the wise Velatropa, there was a stellar unit, Velatropa 24, which produced a planet, Velatropa 24.3, now renowned for its brilliant system of rings. Transgalactic travelers often ask, how did Velatropa 24.3 get its rings? That's planet Earth with its rings, okay? And then it says, naturally, as the keepers of the chromocellular archives of Arcturus 108X, having long pioneered in extragalactic communication, etc., the main protagonist of the story is someone who is referred to as simply as Aka the Fourth. And Aka the Fourth decides to do something daring. He decides to go to Velotropa 24.3 in his time-space cocoon, where he watches the planet for a very long time, and then does something that is considered to be of great daring. He decides to incarnate on the planet, but he takes a double incarnation. In one incarnation, he takes, because he sees how things are going to develop, one incarnation he takes is as an Australian Aborigine. And he does that because he knows that he will stay in Australia for a long time, and he'll be stable there. And so he learns all about the dream time, and this is how he maintains in contact with his Arcturian monitors, because he uses the Chiringa stone, and he's able to telepathically maintain contact with the elders on Arcturus. The other half of his incarnation begins as someone in the Middle East, and the other half of the incarnation becomes what's called a civilization hopper. He hops from one civilization to another, and that incarnation follows the course of history. So one incarnation goes through all the different historical cycles, the other incarnation remains constant in Australia. And so at one point, well, here's Aka the Fourth's meditation on Velotropa 24.3. He says, in Velotropa far away, though devoid of mind's full sway, in measured form with rhythmic heart, all that's done is done as art. So he says that's why he called Velotropa 24.3 the art planet. And so the people on the Arcturus follow Aka the Fourth up to a point when finally there's a big war. There's a nuclear war, and then they lose contact with both the incarnations of Aka the Fourth, and so then from that, having lost the contact, then the story then unfolds by the two lovers. Well, that's the first time that the Arcturians came and began to communicate their message to me. In the intervening period following my writing of that particular text, I of course became increasingly involved in the interpretation of the prophecy of Quetzalcoatl and the harmonic convergence, but it was also during this time that Valum Votan became very present in my life experience. I created a text called Valum Votan's Book of Universal Recollection, including the memory of the Earth, in which the the planetary system presented itself, as we talked about in terms of the 20 seals. And I saw that Valum Votan had journeyed. Yes, there we go. You can just show this page here. Here's Valum Votan sailing past one of the moons of Uranus. And then turn the page. Here. Valum Votan as a shaman in free fall. Okay, here's the Valum Votan leaving his mark on the moon Miranda of Uranus, one of Uranus's moons. And finally, preparing himself to take form, human form, on the Earth. this was a very interesting, there's a lot more in this book, which is all visually presented, and it's actually the visionary visual background to the Mayan factor. This was done in 1986, and then I knew that Pakal Votan was having some type of communication with me. This then became very clear in the Mayan factor. If there's any main protagonist in the Mayan factor, it is Pakal Votan, who is referred to also as Galactic Agent 136656, and there's two numbers there, 136656, and then the other number that we have to continuously refer to is the mysterious figure known as GM108X. Okay, GM108X. Who is actually GM108X actually refers to the entire expanse of the galactic mind and consciousness, which from time to time precipitates in beings like Pakal Votan, who have an extraordinary quality or character. Pakal Votan is very much like the character which I wrote about in the Art Planet Chronicles, the Aka, the fourth, someone who comes down to the earth and after a certain time of surveillance incarnates and lays his knowledge in certain forms of symbolic structures which can only be interpreted at some later point in time. Following the Mayan factor, and which, as I said, has the character of Pakal Votan as one of the key characters there. In 1992, then after the dream spell had been created, and we had taken the dream spell to Berlin and to Russia in particular, because of the fall of communism and the need to plant some seeds there. We were operating at this point, I must say, under the instructions of the Galactic Federation. And our contact with the Galactic Federation, it's their contact to us and not ours to them. I don't ever go looking for the Galactic Federation and saying, hey, are you guys around? Tell me something. Every so often they come and they say something, and this is in the form of what we call telepathic communication. And it was very clear, for instance, after we created the dream spell, that the Galactic Federation made a very clear communique to us that we were to have absolutely nothing to do with money, and that the dream spell was to be a gift, and that anything that we were going to do, any information that they would further give us, was to be a gift, and that we were supposed to be involved in potlatches and giveaways. And so this, of course, made our life more interesting, because we were not supposed to receive money for what we said or did, and we were not supposed to receive money for what we made, and somehow, brother, we were supposed to give these away as gifts, because the Galactic Federation made it very clear to us, what we are giving you is knowledge. You don't sell knowledge. This is not any form of individualistic opinion that's being put down. But the things specifically like the dream spell or the telectonon or the tools are forms of knowledge, and that we were supposed to give these away. That was one very clear communication that we had from the Galactic Federation late in 1991, and that marked the course of our life ever since. After that, we have lived by the grace of people who believe in us, by the grace of people that God has sent our way despite what they thought. We've had some people who came to us and said, I like you, here's $100,000. I don't know why I'm giving this to you. Other people who came to us and thought that they were supposed to support us and didn't know why they were doing it. And other people who said, well, I think I understand what you're doing, I'll support that. Okay, that's how we have lived. I just want everybody to know that we don't have any secrets. Currently, one of our patronesses is here with us, and we're very, very appreciative for everything that she has done for us and helping get this information out. But that was one very clear moment of communication from the Galactic Federation. Then after we came back from Russia in 1992, Bolonik's daughter Heidi found us a house in a place called Temple Valley in the island of Oahu, not far from the Byodo in Buddhist temple. And this was a very stark period of time because we had run out of our resources. I had maxed out my last credit card that I had from my late professional career. My American Express card was up to the tune of $13,000, and I sent it back to I found out the name of the president of American Express, and I said, hey, we're doing this thing called the Dream Spell. It's becoming of galactic culture. It's an educational gift for the Earth. Wouldn't you like to be the first corporate sponsor? You know what they said. You're crazy. So I was in this little house there in Temple Valley, and we were eking out our existence, and I kept having this phrase go through my head about a planet is a terrible thing to waste. And so I sat down one day. I said, well, I got to get this out of my head, okay? And so I sat down at this at my computer and began writing this text. And every day I wrote this text. Let me see. I think it says when it was done sometime. It was finished on the Red Crystal Serpent Day 16 of the Cosmic Moon Year of the White Crystal Wizard on July 12th, 1992. I wrote it in about 5 or 6 weeks, and I would just write it, and I was very surprised by what came out. It's a very profound cosmology, actually, and it really does describe then the history of the experimental zone and how this got to be the experimental zone. It very much defines the experimental zone. It's subtitled Tales and Reports of an Ongoing Investigation. It's not complete, and that's because there's a point where it merges from the imaginal realm into the actual reality, and I realized, well, the actual reality is that I am the actual reality. We are the actual reality. We are the Arcturus probe, and now we are here on Earth as the Arcturus probe. I wrote after I wrote the Arcturus probe, then I wrote another text which was never published, called Harmonic Convergence, the true story or the inside story, which had a lot of interesting, probably libelous characterizations of some famous people we know, and we thought it was a great book, but we couldn't find anyone who would publish it, even though we had been very famous because of the harmonic convergence. No one would touch that book. And then very interesting things that we said about people like Shirley MacLaine and Ted Turner. I probably didn't want to see the light of day. Shirley MacLaine called me up. The last time she called me up was sometime after I'd written that book, and she said, and this was like in the fall of 1992, and she would call me from time to time, and she said, well, what? And I hadn't talked to her about 3 years or something, and she tracked me down, and she said, "What have you been doing, Jose?" And I said, "Well, like I told her about the dream spell and everything else." And I said, "What have you been doing?" She says, "Oh, I've been making money." So and she was asking me for advice about whether I thought Malibu was going to fall into the sea and whether she should move to New Mexico or someplace like that. Well, I sent her the Harmonic Convergence book, which had some things about her from earlier conversations, and never heard from her again. After I wrote that book, then I wrote the 13 Moons in Motion, and the following that I also then wrote the Valum Votan, which is originally the treatise on time viewed from its own dimension. And then after that we ran out of steam. We had some other patrons came in at this point who were involved in supporting the Hawaiian sovereignty movement. And so somehow or other something buzzed in their ear and told them they were supposed to support us as well. And so just as we had run out of money on the Isle of Oahu, they took care of us, and we eventually ended up on the Big Island in a place called Puakea Bay, which is on the very northern point of the Big Island. We're living in a beautiful Atlantean estate, which was so unreal. It was unbelievable. In this very windswept place, the wind was always blowing 30 or 40 miles an hour. Someone had decided they were going to build a lot of huge Atlantean estate lots, but they got about 6 of them done and realized that no one would ever live there because the wind never stopped blowing 30 miles an hour. So we were there in this totally unreal place with our patrons, and we would have a lot of meetings there with the leaders of the Hawaiian sovereignty movement, and we were living in a beautiful little. This mansion then had a swimming pool and a little pool house there by the swimming pool, and so we were living in this pool house. And there I wrote the story of time, the story of Turtle and Tree at that point. These are all things that are all written in this year of the time shift, which we knew it was. And it was very clear, I got something that'll surprise somebody here. Hey, Randy. Okay, this is the calendar that Randy Bruner did for the year of the yellow magnetic seed, Kin 144. Randy had started to produce these calendars then, and we had gotten that calendar. We got some support for Randy producing this calendar from the patrons that we had on the Big Island at that time. So it was a very, very strange period of time, and when it came to be the day out of time of the time shift year, which was the day, our blue cosmic night, we were visited by our friend Taineta Muhammad. Taineta Muhammad we had first met in 1988. She was the widow of Elijah Muhammad, the founder of the Nation of Islam, and she was an accomplished artist and Islamic, actually Quranic scholar, I should say, who had been working with the late Rashad Khalifa on the decoding of the Quran, the 19 code of the Quran, and she happened to find herself in the Great Pyramid of Egypt on August 16th, 1987, and where she heard about the harmonic convergence and realized the harmonic convergence was happening, and she was at the Great Pyramid, and there was a lot of other people there, and then she said, "What's this about?" And they said, "You have to read Jose Arguelles' Mayan Factors," so she did, and then she came looking for us and found us in 1988. Well, we started a very interesting relationship with her. She had been living in Cuernavaca, Mexico, so she travels around the world a lot. So she came with her son Ishmael, who's also a minister in the Nation of Islam, on the day out of time, and we rode around the Big Island counterclockwise that day to commemorate the day out of time. And when we had been in Mexico a little earlier with the dream spell in 1992, we're giving a presentation at her house in which I have very strong intimation of the connection between her husband's teachings, the teachings of Muhammad, and the prophecies of Quetzalcoatl. And we had also met a Mayan healer who lived in Mexico City, Zach Ek Balam. And when Taineta was getting ready to come to the Big Island to see us, she had a run-in with this Mayan healer, Ek Balam, and said, well, when you go see Arguelles, please take this book to him. And so he gave her this little book called De Tulan La Lejana, okay, that's from distant Tulan, or from the distant Tulan. And so she gave me that book at the end of the day, on the day out of time, and I said, okay, well, I'll look at this book in the morning, which was going to be the morning of the July 26th, which was the Kin 144. And I didn't know what to make of this book. It was printed in Havana in 1978, and it says an indubitable Mayan codex, and it's the record of someone called Chac Le El Viejo, or the old one, the ancient one, Chac Le. And I started that morning to read it on the morning of Kin 144, and I was very, very struck by this text. I think it's very mysterious, and it's probably a channeled fiction. On the other hand, it's really hard to say it. It was very interesting that it was actually published in Havana in 1978, which at that time, of course, was Fidel Castro's socialist Havana, so it was very interesting that it would have come out of there. As I read this text, as I started to read it, I realized that it triggered in me a tremendous amount. It's very difficult even now to describe. Every time I have to come to this point of describing this, it is totally difficult for me. Every time this happens, when I wake up in the morning and know that I'm going to be doing this today, I can feel that moment so clearly. I read that text and I got through it, and everything in me changed. I made a lot of notes in the text, and I knew instantly many things. This was the beginning of the awakening of the prophecy, which we call Telektanan. And when I read that text, so many things happened. I went to the book of the prophecies of the Chilam Balam, and I had studied these prophecies for many years. And I knew when I read this text of the Tulan La Lejana, when I read that text, I knew that I had to go directly back to the Chilam Balam, and I knew the Chilam Balam was the story of Antonio Martinez. The story of Antonio Martinez is the most singular prophecy in the text of the Chilam Balam. The Chilam Balam means the jaguar priests, Chilam Balam, which also in this language of the Zavuya means the keepers of the hidden knowledge. The jaguar is associated with the night as the animal of the night. It's also associated with the 14th sign, which is the wizard, which is Ix in the Mayan, Ix, I-X, the wizard, which is also the jaguar, which in the Nahuatl is called Ocelotl, which is the jaguar, and the jaguar is the night, is the night seer, the priest, the wizard. And so I knew that I was supposed to go back to that. And the most singular prophecy in this text is the prophecy of Antonio Martinez. And in the Spanish edition of the books of Chilam Balam, the prophecy of Antonio Martinez, like the kin number 144, appears on page 144. And so then I knew that was correct. And the prophecy of Antonio Martinez is an absolutely perfect example of the Zavuya language in which the Chilam Balam prophecies were written. And I'd always been haunted by this because many years before I always noted that it is the one place where you have the mention of what is called the Book of the Seven Generations, okay, which then becomes the lost book of the seven generations. And I went to the prophecy of Antonio Martinez because this little book from Tulan La Lejana was written in Havana, and the story of Antonio Martinez sets off from Havana, from the port of Havana, and Antonio Martinez sets off from the port of Havana and sails then to Yucatan, and where first he is with a lady, and they build a palace that is a perfect mandala with 4 gold doors, and then after that he is shipwrecked, and then he's taken from the shipwreck. Then he is sitting on the beach, and he's waiting for the 13 waves with the 9 boats. And so I saw these numbers, the 9 and the 13, the 144, the mandala with the 4 gates, the shipwrecked sailor. And living on the coast where we're living in Pu'akea Bay, I was totally in the experience of being the shipwrecked sailor, receiving this prophecy. And then I saw, of course, this prophecy was actually, it's interesting, it was received originally by the Chilam Balam, who was the main prophet at the time, or just before the time of the Spanish conquest, and that this prophecy came to him. It's very interesting because it's a prophecy of a man with a Spanish name, okay, Antonio Martinez, and that this, which is initial AM, okay, and that this prophecy has to do also with what is called the coming of the true religion, the religion of the one true God, which is the Hunab Ku, okay, and it's very clear that this is not the Christian religion, but what comes after the time of the Christian religion. So I saw that also, that this prophecy was a prophecy for the Ahau Katun that begins in the Christian year 1692, and I saw, well, that 1692, that's 1,000 years after 692, which is the dedication of the tomb of Pakal Votan. So I saw, no, this was a coded prophecy, and then I finally began to understand that prophecy completely. I was very aware of the fact that it was kin 144, that prophecy was on page 144, and that when you write 144, going back to yesterday's lesson about the vigesimal notation, when you write 144 in the galactic notation, it's 7.4, because 7 times up here in the 20 position, that means that equals 140, 7 times 20. Each unit equals 20 plus the 4. So that's 144. So in galactic notation, 144 is 7.4. And then something came to my attention, a piece of writing about the harmonic convergence, and it took me to the book of Revelations. And I realized that in the book of Revelations, the first time it talks about the 144,000 is in chapter 7, verse 4. So I saw that connection. Where it says, then I heard the number of those who were sealed, 144,000 from all the tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes. So then at that point there I knew it was very spooky. That something was happening to me that I'd never really experienced before in my life. I was 54 years old at this point, and I was in my cosmic dragon year, and it was in the very midpoint of my cosmic dragon year, and I realized that I was experiencing something that had never happened before to me. I set to work on trying to then decoding things. I knew the information about the 9 waves and the 13 boats arriving in the sea to Antonio Martinez, where he was waiting to see what was going to happen. Antonio Martinez then gets discovered after he's waiting for the 9 and the 13, he gets discovered by some Mayan priests, and the priest asks him, "What is your name?" And he says, "My name is Antonio Martinez, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost," which is a very outrageous thing for a Christian to say. But he knows that that's going to open the door, and the Mayan priests say, "Good, we've been waiting for you," and they take him away, and they say, then for 3 months they read to him the book of the 7 generations, and then he knew about the religion of the prophecy of Hunab Ku. And this is the one, the Hunab Ku hardly appears in Mayan literature. This is one of the few places it appears, is in this prophecy. So that also then took me back to the tomb of Pakal Votan, because I knew the tomb of Pakal Votan was dedicated in the year 692, 1,000 years before Antonio Martinez, and that the dedication of the tomb in the long count was at 9.13. And 9.13, 9 and 13 is 22. There's 22 chapters in the book of Revelations, and Kin 22 is Bolonik, and Bolonik is the patroness of Palenque. So I went back to the tomb, and I began to do decoding. I saw it was the 7 years of prophecy, and that this was the opening to. This was. So first, let's open up here. I began to decode the book of the 7 generations, which I understood to be the same. You hold that there. Here's the 13, 11, 12, 11. The 10th. This would be the same as the 10th Baktun. If you're looking at this, is the same as I showed you yesterday. The same as the map of the 13 Baktuns. The dedication of the tomb occurred at 9.13, which would be right at this point here, which begins, and the last 7, there are 7 Katuns left to close out the 10th Baktun. This was the end of the Maya. This was when we get to this point here, the classic Maya disappeared. They stopped the long count, and the great mystery of the Maya begins. But from the dedication of the tomb, there are exactly 7 Katuns left, each of them the equivalent of one of these kin here. So I knew, I had known that this had to do with the book of the 7 generations, and so I began to focus on decoding these seven kin, and I saw that they were related to what are referred to as the 7 seals of prophecy, which are also referred to in the book of Revelations. And so I saw, first of all, that when I was decoding the kin, I decoded these kin from the point of view of the year. Well, first of all, of the kin themselves, which are the lost generations. For instance, the first one is the crystal wizard, the 12 wizard. The second one then is the 13 eagle. The third one is the magnetic warrior, and so on. So I'd known about the oracle, so I did the oracle for each of these. Then I knew that they correspond to the year. The first year of the crystal wizard, of the lost generation of the crystal wizard, was the year of the magnetic seed, which is kin 144. So then I did the year oracle, and then I did the day out of time oracle for each of those. So the day out of time oracle for the right here you see this is the magnetic seed. The day out of time was the magnetic star, and then down here was the crystal wizard. And so I did the whole decode of all of these for the seven seals, and I saw this was the 7 years of prophecy from 1993 to the year 2000, where we are right now. We're now in this year right here. But when I decoded them according to their planet, okay, to the planet that what it was, because I knew this was an interplanetary thing, and it had to do with decoding the interplanetary mystery. So I also saw that that when you looked at all of these, that Earth appears in these in all of these codes. So there's 3 oracle codes for each year: the year code, the lost generation code, and the day out of time code. So there's 3 oracles. 15 planets appear. 15 positions appear every year. 105 positions in all. And out of those 105 positions, the Earth, planet Earth, appears 7 times. And so I knew that it appears once each year. That one of these is either a hand or a human. And so I knew that that this was that this had to do with the prophecy of the Earth for the next 7 years, and that this was the time of prophecy. I associated here the seals. You see, the first year was the Dali target, second year Celi flow, the third year, which is today also by fractal compression, gamma, which is gamma pacifies, and the middle one is the Kali establishes, the alpha releases, the Limi purifies, and the year that we are in here is the Celio discharges. So I worked, that's the first thing I did, I worked all that out, and then I worked out, it took me, when I worked out all those codes, then I went to seeing, okay, well, this actually is describing what I refer to as the victory plan of the war of the heavens on earth. Okay, that the 7 years of prophecy was actually what was being revealed to me is what is referred to as the victory plan of the war of the heavens on earth. In other words, that what occurred on Maldek, what occurred on Mars, was a very, very large, epic, interdimensional event, and that the experiment was first tried on Maldek, and then it was tried on Mars, and now the experiment was on Earth. And so I saw, oh no, this is actually a big interplanetary battle plan. And so then this was the next phase of the decoding, and I saw that this is when I saw here that this is the Earth orbit. Okay, here this is the soul, what we call the galactic karmic flow, the solar prophetic flow, and that you have, this is the orbit of Mercury, this is the orbit of Venus, this is the orbit of Earth, and then the orbit of Earth connects to the orbit of Uranus over here. Uranus is the 8th orbit, Earth is the 3rd orbit, and that the orbit of Mercury connects with the orbit of Pluto, the orbit or is in resonance with it. The orbit of Venus is in resonance with the orbit of Neptune. The orbit of Earth connects with the orbit of Uranus, the 3rd and the 8th. That creates what's called the perfect 5th, because it's all about finding the lost chord. And then between them, and this is the orbit of Mars, and here's the orbit of Maldek. Mars connects with the orbit of Saturn, and the Maldek connects with the orbit of Jupiter. Here's the AA midway connection in here. So I worked on all that stuff, and I could see, well, this is actually some type of battle plan or some type of astral war map or something like that I was beginning to decode there, and I was beginning to see how all of the different relationships of the planets created this whole structure. But I was most affected by when this map was done. I was most affected by the way the Earth connected with the Uranus, and I saw that this was actually some type of, I felt it was almost like a type of tube or a tunnel, and then I realized, oh, that's right, this connects to the speaking tube. This is all with the speaking tube, and then if you go back, you can put that down, thank you. If you go back to the archaeology of Palenque, where you have, let's see, Professor's got all this stuff here. Did he say a little book about Palenque? What happened to that little book about Palenque? No. Anyway, that's okay. It took me back to thinking tube, and then I said that's like a tube that I could see this tube, and then I remembered that that at the tomb of Valum Votan that there was a tube that ran from the tomb up to the top of the temple. So I went back and I found the books about Palenque and the tomb that I had, and the archaeologist Alberto Ruz. I wish we could find that. I knew I brought it because it had a really interesting picture. Okay? No? It should have been right here. Well, it had it had such a neat description. I had something really surprising to show you. Okay. Okay. This happens, you know. There's too much. Ah! Yay. Okay, good. Thank you for being with me. I know that won't look too professional on the video, but then you can see, well, hey, that guy's very human. He loses his marbles from time to time. Okay. He even tosses his cookies. Okay, so so I went back and I said, okay, there's that tube, and I went back and sure enough, in the text that I had, Alberto Ruz was the archaeologist who discovered the tomb. He had been assigned by the INA, the National Institute for History and Archaeology of Mexico, to be the head of the archaeological site of Palenque around 1947 or 48. And in 1949, he was on the top of the Temple of the Inscriptions, and he was looking there, and he found the funny stone markings on the stone. He lifted it up, and at the floor of the Temple of the Inscriptions is 80 feet above the ground, okay? And no one had ever suspected there was anything in any of these pyramids, but he lifted up that stone and he said, what's there? And then he looked over and there was a piece of tile, and he brushed away and he said, wow, that looks like a tile tube. So he started to dig. It took him 3 years to excavate, and he finally, on the June 15th, 1952, which is the day planetary mirror on the dream spell count, that on that day he finally opened up the tomb, and here, this is my surprise. I have a photograph of Alberto Ruz. That's his son, actually. Okay, the son. This is the son of Alberto Ruz playing his father in the IMAX version of the discovery of the tomb. Okay. And he's sitting there looking at the inscriptions above the tomb, above the place where the tube was found, and showing how he came to discover that. That when he opened that, then it was a profound, powerful experience, because nothing like that had ever been found, and I knew that was a key point. And I went to the tube, and then I said, oh, I know, this is the same. This is what this tube is about. Okay. And then as I contemplated that, I said, what is this tube called? Alberto Ruz called the tube a psychoduct, okay? And that said that it was very interesting, because the tube runs all the way from the wall outside of the tomb all the way up the stairs to the top, and then like why would he do that? Why would that be there? You know, inside the tomb is a really elaborate type of structure within the pyramid. The tomb itself is like 30 feet long, 13 feet wide, and 23 feet high, with very ingenious architecture and engineering to make this inside this pyramid. And then the sarcophagus itself is quite something. The lid of the sarcophagus, which is now the famous, what you see there, and which is quite well known around the planet now, that sarcophagus lid is 12 and a half feet long, 7 feet wide. Okay, so it's really immense stuff. And just to think of how they did that and made the doors and all that, and put the body in the tomb was covered with jade, over 200 pieces of jade. It had a beautiful jade mask, and it was really very, very stunning when they found it. But what was with this tube, and why was that tube there? And later on, what Alberto Rus speculated was that somehow or other that the person in the tomb was able to speak from the dead, or that sent oracular messages, or people to the top, to the temple of the inscriptions at the top, whatever, something like that. And I said, well, no, that's really it. That's the whole thing. And Alberto Rus, 20 years after he discovered that tomb, he wrote that he said, if it had not been for that tube, I never would have dug and found that tomb. So that tube was placed there very, very specifically and very deliberately. Let's see, where's my eraser again? So I was very struck by the fact, by what Alberto Rus said. He said, if that tube wasn't there, I never would have dug, okay? I would never have excavated. I think, well, that's very interesting. How could anyone have found that tomb anyway? How would anyone have known about it? Because they all disappeared in the year 830, and no one even at the time of the Spanish conquest, no one knew about that tomb. Probably a few of the Maya knew, but they weren't going to tell anyone about it. And all that existed exactly in the year 1692 was the myth of a figure called Votan, or the great Pakal Votan. There was some mysterious figure they talked about, but no one knew who he was or where he had been or anything about that. They said he came to a place called Valum Votan and incarnated and built a place called Nachan. And from time to time, on a ladder of 13 serpents, okay, would descend to the rock of heaven, okay, and then back again. That he did 4 times. That's some of the myths or legends about the great Votan that existed. But who would know about this tomb? How could you find that? So this is part of the miracle of prophecy, because that tomb was dedicated in 692. It was only by that tube that it was discovered. As Alberto said, if that tube wasn't there, I never would have excavated. And then I thought about that, and I said, well, that's very, very interesting, because between if you take 692 away from that, that's exactly 1,260 years. Okay? And I said, that was very specific timing. Smart guy to set that up so that it would be found exactly 1,260 years after it was dedicated. And then I thought, well, what's this Mayan prophecy stuff all about if it's not about the year 2012? That tomb was dedicated exactly 1,320 years before 2012. This guy was really a smart guy to have calculated that his tomb would be opened at that time, that it would be exactly, and that the relationship of it would be to this that would be exactly 1320 years before the end of the cycle, that it would be opened exactly then. So I knew that the 1260, we had already discovered the 1260 and 13 timing frequencies, so I said, well, I know that this was a perfectly timed event. And I knew that things that are that perfectly timed, okay, to be discovered, okay, the tomb was perfectly timed to be discovered. It was 40 years from the opening of the tomb to the time shift. In 1992, that was 40 years, and then precisely, and I was in the desert of my life in that 40th year, in that time shift, even though I was living in this weird palatial place out in Puakea Bay on the Big Island, but I was in the desert of my life because I had no idea what was going to happen to me. But at the end of that 40th year, precisely on the day Kin 144, all this stuff started just unraveling so fast and rapidly. It was just amazing what was occurring, and I realized, well, that's very perfectly, everything is so perfectly timed. This can only happen because it's absolutely planned. It's absolutely planned. And I was planned. I was planned to be there, or I was the plant to be there. And I knew from my studies of Tibetan Buddhism that there's a particular process that is referred to as the process of the terma and the terton. The terma refers to what are called hidden teachings, literally teachings that are hidden, okay, to be found specifically at a particular point in time by a person who is actually planned to be there to find it, okay. In the Tibetan tradition, the person who finds the teaching is called a terton, okay, T-E-R-T-O-N, and the teaching itself is a terma, T-E-R-M-A. I knew that most in the Tibetan tradition, the concealer of the teachings is Padmasambhava, the great Padmasambhava. And I knew that Padmasambhava is associated with being in Tibet just after the dedication of the tomb. I knew that Muhammad preceded Pakal Votan, and Muhammad died in the year 632. Pakal Votan's time of power began in the year 631, which was exactly 1,366,560 days after the beginning of the long count, and which also was the completion of 73 cycles of tunes and 72 52-year cycles, and also 36 great Venus cycles, a very, 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 very highly synchronized moment, which I wrote about in the Mayan Factor. But so I knew that in the Tibetan tradition that it was Padmasambhava who left the terma, and then there was always a terton, different tertons to find that. And I knew immediately, oh, I see, this is Pakal Votan was the concealer of the terma, the terton is the telectonon, and I'm the terton. So that was very clear. All of this stuff took me about 3 or 4 weeks to work on and do all that decoding, and I noticed that when I got done with these codes, I noticed that to transform these codes, the codes shift so that the lost generation every year for the first half year is the bottom oracle, and then beginning at the midpoint of the year on the 15th day of the resonant moon, it goes to the top position. And I saw that for that first year that the lost generation, the white crystal wizard, is guided by death, which is Mars. And I saw that on 7/15, on resonant 15 of 1994, when that oracle came to the top, that Mars would be on the top. And I said, well, I said to my wife, I said to Bo and Nick, let's go out. I said, I've had enough of this. I was in this state for about 4 weeks. And then on August 24th, we went out, and as we went out, and it was the first time I'd been out of this unreal Atlantean mansion, and I said, this thing about Mars is really something. It's important. I don't know why right now. But we went out, and we stopped at a little restaurant. We took a drive. We stopped at a restaurant, and I looked at the newspaper, and the headline was, Mars Observer Lost. I said, what? I said, no, I'm the Mars Observer. I'm found. I said, that's very interesting. So after that, I said, I had already said, we're out of here. We have to go to Mexico. I can only finish the decoding of this prophecy by going to Mexico. And so then I knew that was the big plunge. And I said to our patrons, we have to leave. And I said, we need one-way tickets to Mexico. And so they got us one-way tickets to Mexico, got us some nice luggage, and said, here's $2,000. And that began the 7-year mission, which we're completing here right now with you. Like I said, this is a very momentous time. Very interesting. When we left with $2,000, and when we left Germany, after coming back, after this last year, we had to go to Chile, South America again. Then we had to go to Europe. We went to Russia, to Germany, and then we also had to go to Japan. We also went to Japan. But our last trip, as I said, coming from Russia and Germany. When we left Germany to come here to prepare for this event, people there from the different groups, they collected some money to give us. And we left the big island 7 years ago, $2,000. The money that we got when we cashed it in at the money exchange was $1,946. So we left with $2,000. We came back at the end of the 7 years with $54 less than that. But I figured, well, I was 54 years old when this began, so they took out $54 to credit my age when I began this process. Everything is very precise. That's why I said when I began talking about this, it's not easy to talk about, and because when you realize that how precise all this is and how actually well orchestrated this is, that there's only to submit. The only real thing to do is just to submit. We rage with our egos, and one day we're this and one day we're that, and there's only to submit and just cut the crap. So that's what we had to learn. Because we left and we went to Mexico, and the adventure that we'd been on in the last 7 years is unbelievable. I mean, it takes a long time to sit down and talk about it. I think about it. I wake up every morning and think about it. When we went to Mexico, I kept a book which is called the Codex Telectonon, and I continued working on these codes. When we went to Mexico, we didn't know where we would live or how we would live, but every day I continued to work on these codes. I knew the key was what's called the cube of the law. The cube of the law is, I realized, was the central section between the galactic flows, the solar prophetic flow, and the orbits of Earth and Uranus. And I realized that was a square 4 by 4, and that what I was really dealing with when I was dealing with this was a fourth dimensional interplanetary mind map. And so we kept working on those codes, and slowly what we know as the Telectonon came to appear. We worked out certain, let's see, what's that one? Nice image, yeah, here. And this describes all of the movements in the pattern of the interdimensional or the interplanetary fourth dimensional mind map of the solar system, and it also shows the location of the Earth. Earth appears here, 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 and here, and then in these two places, and then these are the two places of Uranus, Earth and heaven. Here, this is the navigation tower and the spirit tower. Here we are today. So I kept working on these codes, which is a tremendous amount of work. We were living, we were traveling in buses, we were living in all sorts of strange places. At one point we were living in a little place where we were just sleeping in a hammock, and I realized also that what we're dealing with was a very cosmic kind of love story. So you can see some of that work, and when I finally got the form pretty well down, which was by the end of 1993, to see what it was, then I knew that it was that there was a whole prophecy also that had to be decoded, and this was the final script of what we call now the game of prophecy, and that very early in 1994, I had kept a lot of other notes on this, and it was continuously being referred to as the Mayan apocalypse, the prophecy of the Mayan apocalypse, and that I knew that I'd done all this mostly graphic work and decoding and so on, and I saw that there was a tremendous amount to it. I saw that it was bringing together the prophetic streams of Buddhism, the prophetic streams of Christianity, and the prophetic streams of Islam with the prophetic streams of the Maya, and that was in itself was such a tremendous type of labor, and that then I knew that still there was one further thing to go, and that was the prophecy itself, and that I got a very strong clairvoyant vision, and that when I was staying in a little hotel in Cuernavaca, the Valum Hotel, and I had this clairvoyant vision, and Valum Votan came to me and said, "You have to go find this little house near Ocotitlan in the valley north of Amatlan, which is the birthplace of Quetzalcoatl. You have to go there, and there you have to write the prophecy." Yeah, and I was very specifically told the prophecy was to be written so that those people, it could be presented to those people who have means, so that they can become charitable, so that they can give. And that was why I had to write the prophecy. I said, okay, the prophecy too, something I have to write. And so I was given the vision of this house, and I said, well, I know that house. It's just up from Huehuecoyotl. Huehuecoyotl is where the son of Alberto Ruz, whose name is also Alberto Ruz, had a little ecological type of community, artist community there, and where we had been able to stay from time to time. And I knew that north of that community, on the way to Ocotitlan. Ocotitlan is the last town on the road there. It's very, very poor Indian community. Buses go from Ocotitlan to Tepoztlan, and they start at running at 5:30 in the morning. But you get in the bus and you see the Indian women with the laundry going down to the river. They don't have electricity up there. They got cut out of the deal because they didn't want a train to come across the mountain from Mexico City. So because of that, the government cut them out, and so it's a very poor place. But we were on the road there, the last spot with electricity, and it was this little house, and I knew who had that house, and we went there. I said, hey, we have to, well, I know you got a room for rent. you're supposed to rent that room to me. And he said, well, someone else is already looking at it. And I said, please, if you can, you're supposed to hold that room for me. As it turned out, the person who had been looking at the room to rent couldn't rent it. And so we got the room. I went then I spent the next few days, we moved into that place on Red Magnetic Skywalker, which I knew was the day of sacred to Quetzalcoatl. And the next few days I went to Alberto Rus's library in Huehuecoyotl, and when I said, let me look at your father's books, he had most of his father's books there. I found a number of books. I went to Tepoztlan. I knew there were certain images I was supposed to photocopy. I photocopied those, and I placed them on blank pages in this text. So this was the text I found. I placed them in blank pages, and then after I placed all the illustrations, here you see some of the illustrations. That was originally blank, and then on the morning of the self-existing warrior, I began to write the text. I woke up. I knew I was commanded to write the text, and every morning for 9 mornings until the crystal seed, I wrote. I'd get up and I'd write, and by candlelight, and then when dawn would come, I'd stop writing. And when I got done writing, I had filled out all the blank pages to the seal of the Hunab-Ku, which I'd finished there, and that was the complete text, which you see here. We finished that text on that day of the crystal seed, and a few days after that, we were able to, or maybe a week after that, we were able to find somebody with a computer in Mexico City, and we put that text down on the computer, and so we had a copy of it that was in print. We gave it to a friend of ours, Viviana Lerma in Cuernavaca, and she immediately translated it into Spanish. And as a result of that, by March 18th, I believe it was, we were, 19th, 20th it was, we were in Mérida, Yucatan, we had a big gathering, and we read the whole prophecy in Spanish. We had a big gathering of people there, and we read the prophecy in Spanish, and the people from the journal Macropoli were there, and they immediately said, we're going to put the whole text in the journal, which they did. That was a very interesting story. They put that in very, very quickly, and so it was published in Mexico immediately, that prophecy, and I think it had a lot to do with a lot of things that were happening in Mexico at that time. We can explain some of the things later, but when we were in Mexico, it was very interesting during that year, because we said this is the time of the Mayan apocalypse, and on January 1st, 1994, began the Zapatista uprising in Chiapas, not far from Palenque, which shocked everybody there. And we had been saying that since we got to Mexico for the previous 3 months, that something like this was going to happen, and it's part of the prophecy. And also in the prophecy it talks about the 10 kings of Mexico, of modern Mexico, which refer to the 10 presidents of the ruling party, the PRI, the Partido Revolucionario Institucional, the Revolutionary Institutional Party, from Lázaro Cárdenas up to the present president at that time, who was Carlos Salinas de Gortari. And we knew also that Carlos Salinas de Gortari, whose galactic signature was 11th Serpent, was one of the 13 signs on the side of the tomb. So we made a lot of effort at communicating the prophecy to Gortari. And the prophecy also says that whoever would be the 11th should embrace me, as meaning embrace Valum Votan as the prophet of Mexico, and that if this didn't happen, that it wouldn't be good. You can read that in the prophecy text itself. And it was interesting that the person who was going to be the 11th president, the 11th king of modern Mexico, Luis Donaldo Colosio, 5 days after we read the prophecy in Merida, was assassinated in Tijuana. And so the story of his assassination was presented at the same time as the prophecy Telectanon in the magazine Macropoli. So this was very, very interesting conjunction of the prophecy with the contemporary political situation in Mexico. That did not make our life easy any longer in Mexico. We eventually ended up leaving and heading for South America, where then we began to present the whole full-blown form of the prophecy. But all of this prophecy is encoded in the tomb of Valum Votan. That's the important point. As I was saying, that this prophecy is referred to as a terma, literally hidden teaching, written in symbolic language that can only be revealed when the mind of the Teraton, the one who's supposed to understand it, is triggered by certain signs. The signs that triggered it actually were the little book that's called De Tulan La Lejana, because I knew Tulan, which is also the same as Tulan, that this was the origin of the Maya. This is the place of the origin of the Maya. I also knew that as a child in Mexico, when I was living in Mexico City, that my parents lived in an apartment building on Calle Tula, okay, which I knew that was also part of the plan and of the coding. And so I saw that, all that was triggered, all of this was actually intended to be, okay, and that now we had the mission of taking this prophecy around the world, and we knew that our mission was to go to as many places, to as many different peoples and cultures as was humanly possible by us to deliver this message. As we went through our travels, we knew that we had to go throughout Latin America, because Latin America was actually the place where the what we call the Gregorian civilization was actually established. Latin America is Gregorian civilization. It's the supreme epitome of Gregorian civilization. It's the imposition of the European Gregorian culture on a land that was dispossessed completely. Okay, all the people, the original people, are completely dispossessed in this land, and so we knew we had to bring this prophecy there, and so we spent a lot of time in South America in 1994 and 1995, and then from there we were able to go from Santiago, Chile, to the 80 days around the world for a new time of planetary peace, which took us literally around the world. We went from Santiago back to Santiago in 80 days. We went to Johannesburg, South Africa. We went to Cairo, Egypt. We went to Moscow, Russia. We went to Bangalore, India. We went to Hong Kong. We went to Tokyo, Japan. We went to Maui. We went to San Francisco. We went to New York, to the United Nations. We came back to Mexico for the first time after we had left, and gave a presentation at the Palace of Hernan Cortez in Cuernavaca, and from there, then we went down to Brazil, and then back finally to Santiago, Chile. And by that time, we were very, very far away from who we thought we had used to be. So there's a lot of details about this, as I had the opportunity, because we're doing this seminar not too far from where I live, to have some of these, what you might call archival documents, to show you. I have a lot of other, I kept many notebooks, and there was a lot of stuff that came. As I said, the Telectanon that we see is just a little bit of what's called the Great Telectanon, okay, and the Great, because I knew that the Telectanon is a prophecy. It's also this what you might call the game of prophecy, and as well as the actual text of the prophecy. But there is the Great Telectanon, because the Telectanon is something that that is very, very cosmically vast, and it embodies the information and knowledge of the unification of all the spiritual traditions. And this is one of the main teachings of the Telektanon, is that of the three messengers of the awakening, of the Buddha, of the Christ, and of the Muhammad, of the three special messengers, who are the Padmasambhava, the St. John of Patmos, and Quetzalcoatl, and then of course of the great prophet Valum Votan, who was the seventh seer, and that there have been different revelations of the Telektanon since then that are all pure aspects of the Telektanon, most important the 20 tablets, and also the 7777. This afternoon we'll cover some more of the details of the prophecy and also the structure of the game, and I think Polonik has a few things to say.
I started today by saying how precious life is, and it's very precious that Valum Votan is able to give us this story. He won't be always here, and it's an incredible thing to realize how much we are melted in the presence of God. And especially in this country, I feel like we really need to understand a new spirituality that is being given by the Telektanon. So at the end of the Telektanon prophecy, there's a beautiful statement about the religion of truth is the religion of the earth. It must be asked, what is it that will help the people and at the same time help the earth? The religion of truth and the religion of the earth must be one. People of the book reunited with the people of the dawn. This can only be done by placing everyone in a new common time that is in tune with the cycles of nature and the earth. This is the universal harmony accomplished by the 13-moon, 28-day calendar change. The religion of truth is the religion of the earth. Earth needs a religion of truth that is not dogma, not money, not sect, and not anything defined by boundaries, paper, or selfishness of any kind. Only truth will satisfy the earth. If asked, of what religion are you? Answer, I am of the religion of the truth, which is the religion of the earth. The 13-moon, 28-day calendar change is a fundamental change. It is not a legislative change, but a change mandated by divine authority that transcends and unifies all sects and creeds in a higher calling of the earth. Planetary service is the basis of the new time. Ask not what you can do for yourself, your religion, or your country, but what you can do for your planet. New groups of planetary servers are needed to transcend dogmas of money, nationalism, and sectarianism of every kind, who yet understand the fundamentally spiritual nature and divine unity of all creation. Calling all planetary servers, those who can walk a planetary service wave spell together on behalf of the earth, beyond creed of self, sect, country, or dogma of any kind, free in spirit, knowing no authority but the one divine spirit of all creation. Planetary servers, wizards of the earth is calling for all wizards to work a planetary service wave spell. The earth is recruiting now for duty. At that time, beginning White Electric Wizard, July 26, A.D. 1995, the wave spell of planetary servers in action for the earth. Earth wizards, let us cooperate. Let us surrender our egos. Let us walk humbly on this earth. Let us listen to each other. Listen and listen again. Forget yourself, your ego. Forget what you thought you were before you heard this message. Surrender. Surrender in the present moment. Be in joy. Know that God has a plan for all of us. If we become planetary servers, our lives will be brilliantly smooth in the energy of love. All pain and conflict are self-induced. Only God can help us. To submit to God is the highest gift that we can find in our life.